Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio. I'm Dr. Jacalyn Kerbeck, and our show today is The Wise Ones. The star of our show is Mr. Red.Olaughlin. We've got a fabulous guest backstage. Before we bring out our guest, let me just tell you about Mr. Red.Olaughlin. He and I are working together diligently to bring out yet another book. He is my book coach, and every book so far, I think Red will keep me honest, I think it's 7, has either been a #1 bestseller or a #1 new release, and I'm telling you it's because of him. He knows his stuff. He's also an author. He's a longevity strategist. He's one of our expert presenters on Talking Heads. And he is also somebody who has an incredible amount of experience in life, as well as, I think, 5 degrees. And not only is he intelligent and educated and so humble, but he's a great person, a great human being. Let's bring him out. Red.Olaughlin, hello.
Howdy, Dr. Jacalyn. Again, you're
I
making
believe
me,
you're red right now.
yeah, you're making me blush a little bit, but that's your standard. So eventually I'll get used to it.
Well, I mean it, Red. You are truly an amazing person, and so much so that I'm always introducing you to other people on this platform because you have such expertise, and you're also a publisher. I neglected to mention that, and you actually had a new book come out recently. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing and how you've brought value to people in terms of longevity.
I research the human body at the cellular level, chemically speaking. I look for cause and effect relationships. Treat a cause, fix a problem. Treat a symptom, and you'll always be treating symptoms. So my real love in life happened about 15, 16 years of age. I was taking chemistry in high school, and I fell in love with it. I got a degree in it. I was all ready to become a chemist and just spend the rest of my life in a chemistry lab. However, I got an invitation to Vietnam I could not turn down. By the time I got back, things had changed. I started going in a different direction. Maybe not quite 10 years ago, my wife came down with breast cancer. In the process of being her caregiver, I resurrected my love of chemistry because I started diving into what's causing some of these things that my wife is having. And I started looking at, well, if we do this, can we stop it? Can whatever it may happen to be? And so all of a sudden I went from writing and speaking around the country on motivation, self-improvement, selling my stuff in the back of the room. I started writing and speaking on health and wellness. My focus centered on longevity, and I have a couple of books in that area. I released a book about 2 months ago on Alzheimer's disease. It was a compilation of over 40 articles I've written over the last several years on Alzheimer's. Literally 2 weeks ago, I released a book on how to write and publish your book for free. And it's available on Amazon and my website. And it's just, there's so many things that you can do for your health, for your finances, for your relationships, for everything in the world that you want to do if you just learn a little bit. And so part of this program here on the USA Global TV and Radio Network is awareness, self-awareness, education, being able to ask those questions. You go into your doctor and say, hey, doc, what about this? Can I do that? And it gives you leverage on the fact that you don't always have to take a pill just because they say take one, because there are options out there. And that's what the whole purpose of the show is. But another purpose of the show in particular is to make our guests the star of the show. And in the process of me becoming a multiple book author, I met a guy named Bob May on one of the mastermind groups I was in. And Bob suggested that I talk to a couple people, and I got in touch with Jeff Gregg, We ended up exchanging books and chatting a little bit. He lives about 50 miles north of where I do. We tried to get together to have a cup of coffee, grab something to eat, and everybody's schedule was blocked here, there, and yonder. So anyway, we're still going to do it. He's not that far away, and particularly here in Texas, that's basically an hour or less. And so Jeff Gregg recently wrote a book, and that book is this one right here, An Emergent Truth. And we're going to talk about Jeff. We're going to talk about his book. We talk about him being an author and anything else he wants to bring up, because he is the star of the show today. So Jeff, please join us.
Hello, Jeff. Welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Jeff, I want to just announce to our audience that your last name is Cregg, and I think it's somewhere it's Craig. So our apologies for that.
Not a problem.
So, Jeff, you are retired from the software industry. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. What was your experience like? Because I know for me, software, before I owned my own business, it was kind of like scary, evil, stay away. It's another world, aliens.
It is a different world. There's no question about that. It takes a certain type of mind to really enjoy writing software. And one of the things I had difficulty getting into that mindset was trying to retrain my mind from a purely scientific and slightly artistic personality into one that is logical, that is sequential, and one that can actually see the details and how a task is accomplished piece by piece. It's not easily accomplished by someone who has more of an abstract way of thinking. And my bachelor's degree is in geology, and that's as much art as it is science. And when I graduated in '84, I'm really dating myself here, it was at the bottom of the oil bust, and nobody was hiring bachelor degree geologists. And I had the opportunity to go back to school, and I went into computer science because that seemed to be where all the jobs were occurring. And it was an adjustment, trying to get my brain to think from a global, how rocks form, abstract way of thinking into the concise, concrete method. It was an adjustment, and there were many times where I was about to throw in the towel and just call it quits. But I persevered and ended up working for in the oil industry, writing software for upstream, downstream, and a little bit of midstream applications.
Thanks for sharing that, Jeff. I think we found out backstage that you and Red have a number of things in common. And if you want to just touch on that, where you used to work.
Sure. I think we were both alumni of Halliburton. Halliburton is an oil field services company that provides mostly cementing. That's their core business. But in the last 30 years, they were trying to get their fingers in just about every other aspect of the services side of the industry. At one point, I worked for a software outfit called Sierra Geophysics up in Seattle that Halliburton had bought right about the time I got out of graduate school. And it was the least likely place I had ever expected to live while working in the oil industry. And I wasn't about to complain about it because it's actually beautiful up there. I wouldn't want to go back there and live, but it was a great place to live at the time, and really learned a lot about the area and how software was developed back then. Things have changed quite a bit since then, though.
That is for sure. Thanks for sharing that, Red.
One of the things that I worked on was the manufacturing of tools that you put down hole, whether you measurement while drilling and after drilling. And when you're putting that software into a tool so it can measure the formation, it has to go through a lot of different tests. And, a lot of those tests involve high heat. We're talking many PSI, 20,000 PSI. We're talking about vibrations, 20 Gs in all three directions. You're talking about a very substantial test. And it's not the software. The software just sits there on whatever it's sitting on. So you have to make sure that everything can live in the environment it goes to. And whether that environment is outer space or downhole or just even in your car. That software is part of our life. It doesn't matter. We are living in that world. And just recently, I was a benefactor to Dr. Jacalyn in something that she has now just gone overboard in and called ChatGPT. So she has her own artificial world she lives in periodically. And so it's one of those things that, well, if I've never done it, I don't know. All of a sudden you do it, and I can't live without it. So it's very, very interesting. And what do you? I assume that you have some level of more intimate understanding of artificial intelligence than we do, based on what I read in your book. In Emergent Truth deals a lot with artificial intelligence. So why don't we go off in that direction for a little bit and tell us how you get involved in that?
Well, right before I retired from Halliburton, which was 3 years ago in May, the product I was working on was Halliburton was starting to dip their foot into the pool of machine learning. We were developing earth modeling applications that what they call are a stochastic approach to reservoir modeling and that kind of stuff. And so we were starting to just scratch the surface on machine learning. We never actually started, at least before I got out of the industry, we hadn't actually developed any neural networks on it yet. Not that I know of, but we were gearing up for it. And that was my exposure to it. But as far as the inspiration for my book, I was very interested in it about 7-8 years ago, when this seemed to be the great interest of technology that everyone was talking about. Well, the singularity is near. Things are really heading toward AI. There's nothing we can do about it. It's going to happen no matter what, no one way or the other. And having spent 25 years in software development, I thought, okay, well, there's a lot more than meets the eye to how software is actually developed here. And so I thought, there's a story in here that could be very, I think, artfully told about what the truths are, what are the realities that AI faces, and what it can and cannot do ultimately as far as an application. And so I started kicking around ideas. And when I was a kid, when I was 8 years old, the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey had come out. It was in the summer of 68. And that movie I saw left a huge impression on me. As if you remember, if you've seen the movie, one of the stars of the movie was the computer HAL 9000. And I refer to it as a he, because it was portrayed as a truly conscious, sentient being that had his own autonomy. And I thought, that is something to really ponder. And for an 8-year-old, that it never really left my consciousness. And so finally, about 7-8 years ago, I decided, okay, now I've got the plot. I'm going to just sit down and hammer this out. I always liked to write, and I never really had any formal training in writing other than college composition. But as I developed it, it seemed to take on a life of its own. And it went through a couple of rewrites, painfully, but it finally got to the point where it was ready to go live and be published a year ago last May.
How long did it take you to write the book?
I started on it, I think it was in the summer of 2015, and I finished my first draft of it in 2019. I sent it around to a couple of close friends. I had been associated with, I don't know if you're familiar with something called the Discovery Institute. I knew a couple of people up there. I sent them drafts of it, and one fellow read it and gave me a very frank critique of it, and he gave me some really great advice on where to change it and make it better, much better. So I spent about 9 to 12 months rewriting it. And like I said, about the beginning of 2022, in January, I was ready to go. And I found what they call a hybrid publisher. Found one of these ladies. She's actually here up near Lufkin, Texas. And she showed me all the ropes on going through the hoops that needed to be jumped through to have it published and it's now available on Amazon.
You're talking about CJ with Texas
I was just
Sisters?
going to ask, is it
That
CJ?
is, that is correct.
Yeah.
And our colleague Bob May is a fellow author of theirs.
We love
Yeah.
CJ, that's for
Yeah.
sure.
CJ's been on the show before, and she is a competitor of mine because I publish books, but we both publish, but we're not doing the exact same kind. We're both independent publishers, but there's a difference in the services that we offer, and so it's just. But it's one of those things. I think you'll find, book authors, they'll do anything to help other authors because that's just kind of what we do. And I assume the same thing on software programming to a degree. You're not going to give away the whole secret, but you'll give away enough to get people pointed in the right direction, because that's just part of who we are, to help other people. And so from a publishing perspective, I have things that I do that they don't. They do things that I don't. So we just kind of, you get somebody, hey, you probably ought to go talk to Red, or you need to go talk to CJ, but regardless.
Right. Yeah. And when I first approached CJ and her time at the time, her sister Lydia was working closely with her. I think she's kind of taken a lesser role in the company now. But I pitched the book to her as a Christian themed science fiction, and that was not something that she had really heard much about or had much experience with. And so she was excited about it, that it was kind of new territory for a novel. And I'm like, well, okay, I'd be happy to be the first one to take all the bullets on that one. So we'll see how well it takes off with readership. But actually, our friend Bob May, I was on one of CJ's book launchings for another one of her authors, and in those broadcasts, she does a spin the wheel and win prizes type thing. And Bob was on there, and I had donated an electronic copy of my book, and Bob won it. And so that's after he read it. I was actually in Hawaii on vacation, and he called me up on my cell phone in Hawaii. He was really excited about reading my book. So I thought that was an interesting reaction from a fan that who we've now become very good close friends. We've talked a couple of times.
That's wonderful. There's also a comment from author Bob May. Stochastic 3D, like stochastic mammogram.
Stochastic in that you have to take an iterative approach. You have to also once you identify your algorithm, you refine it through iterations, and it gets you in the ballpark of where you want to go. Is that what I think that's what he means by a stochastic mammogram. I've never heard of a stochastic mammogram before, but
we'll wait to hear back more from author Bob
It's
May.
the opposite of heuristic.
Yeah.
So that gives you a non-answer. Yeah. I think what he's talking about on the stochastic mammogram is that they have mammograms that actually will do a slicing as it goes across, and you'll actually end up looking real life at the tissue as it goes across. So you're looking at a real live time, not just a big blob, but something that gives you a much better diagnostic tool. I can't think of the name of it. My wife goes through, she's had this now since she had her breast cancer. It's not the old standard mammogram where this is a much, much, much easier way to do things, and much faster, easier way to say, hey, you don't have a thing to worry about. And I can't think of the name of it right now. I don't remember it being called stochastic mammogram, but it's certainly, if you're looking at an iterative process of going, across and doing the analysis, could very easily be called that.
Yeah.
Jeff, I have a question for you, because the show is The Wise Ones, and so we always want to give education as well. And you talked about having to rewrite your book. And so in software, there's iteration after iteration, right? You're constantly rewriting. And so what my question is, because of your background, was there less of an emotional attachment when you thought, this is my baby, my book, and now I'm going to rewrite it, because you have this experience of doing software development? Or was it still like, this is my baby, I don't want to rewrite it? How did you take the news?
I wish it had been less emotional, but no, the more I did it, the more I worked on it, the closer I got to it emotionally. And after I had my first critique from my Discovery Institute friend, that was a tough thing to go through. But looking at it from this side of it, it was, I thank God that it happened, because it certainly wouldn't have been uh, redeveloped to the point where it is now. And that really, that was tough medicine to take, but I was glad for the experience. And yes, it was um, hard to swallow at first, and I had to take several weeks and just say, okay, I got to either cut bait or fish, as they say. And I finally decided, yeah, maybe there is something, this is worth salvaging. And I just poured back into it, and inspiration struck. And I also found a really great editor at my church, who was just, that to me, that made a huge difference as well, because she was, I think Bob refers to as a holistic editor, who does not only syntax, grammar, and structure, but also is willing to give you ideas on how to possibly tweak passages and do a little bit better character development, that kind of stuff. So it's really an amazing thing to have, if you've got someone who is that good at editing and who has an objective approach to it. So helps a lot.
On my last book, I stopped the publication of it to include a chapter on how to use AI to write, and also how to use AI to edit. And I actually used the Chat GPT to edit my book.
Wow.
And so that was one thing but you can't just say edit : and because edit means different. It's different meaning than what we think of edit as an author. To Chat GPT, edit really means summarize. So I have 3 pages of a chapter that I want to edit, and it gives me 2 paragraphs. And I think I have to, and so it finally dawned on me, if I say edit for syntax, edit for diction, edit for punctuation, edit for spelling, it'll do a very good job for that. But if I want proofread, that's going to give me what I commonly would think as edit. So it's not the artificial intelligence. You also have to be able to speak their language in order to ask it a question.
Right. Yeah. As smart as AI portends to be, at the end of the day, it's still not. It's not another human being, and it's from what I understand how it works is it still has a long way to go as far as being what they call being able to pass the Turing test. And I don't know if you're familiar with that phrase. I have seen several articles on it's another website that's run by the Discovery Institute. It's called let me see, mindmatters.ai. And they have some eggheads there that sit down and they put Chat GPT through its paces, and they've written a couple of pieces where they're not 100% convinced, but they're quite sure that there are humans in the loop when in these quick responses from Chat GPT. So I think there's a lot left to be developed as far as the true general intelligence on these things, but that remains to be seen. I think it's a big question mark at this point.
It reminds me of
It reminds me of
the Wizard of Oz, when they pull back the curtain, we see it's just the man there. So.
It's interesting. We used to rely on Google, and in the presentation I'll be doing next after the show, Talking Heads, I actually compare some of the responses for the same question I ask Google versus Chat GPT. And sometimes they align and sometimes they don't. And sometimes you ask this person who's on YouTube as a guru, well, tell me a little bit about this person's philosophy, or can't find them. Now, I will say that Chat GPT is truncated, stops any searches after September 2021. It does not have any most current information. But some of these gurus that I'm referring to have been in the business a lot longer than that. And so you have to ask yourself, well, if I can't find them and I can find them just doing a simple search, what advantage does this give me? So there's a lot of things out there that I'm starting just literally within the last 30 days to understand how and why I should use this or that. And just leave it at that.
And it's a two-edged sword, because if you're willing to ask these things a question that's fairly open-ended, and you're willing to accept the answer you get, then you're kind of at the mercy of its own heuristics and its programming that could be or couldn't be accurate. And there again, you're going to see biases of the developers in the code, and they try to bend over backwards to eliminate any kind of implicit bias that they write into these things. But still, software is written by human beings, and yeah, these chat bots supposedly have some autonomy where they can go in and alter their own code, but at the end of the day, there's still going to be an overriding, controlling, a driving code that it will take commands from, that drives it. And that's kind of central to one of the major points that I in my plot of my book, is that all this hype and expectation that these machines will become, or are very close to becoming, sentient and self-aware. I actually, in my book, I provide a fairly simple test, and I'm kind of surprised that I haven't actually seen that in the popular culture. So I don't want to give it away and give it a spoiler alert, but I think it's kind of telling that either it hasn't occurred to the common, or the common knowledge of it, or people just are kind of, like you said, keeping the curtain closed on the man behind the curtain.
Yeah. I know when I write, I have to give references of the stuff that I have, and I could check the reference. Last week, I was giving a presentation on AI, and part of that was a couple lawyers were talking that they had got their butts handed to them by a judge because the other attorney said the references they had in their paper did not exist, or they were not applicable to that, and they had used AI to draft up something. Mm-hmm. So it's a tool, and that's all it is. You can't take it to the bank,
right,
but you can use it. Okay, that looks pretty good. Let me verify that. Let me verify this. And as long as you have the verification there, I think it's a great tool. But you just can't assume that it's 100% accurate just because, because last week on YouTube, Abraham Lincoln gave his second, inaugural address. I mean, just you can't just take it at face value. You have to actually do your research.
Yep.
Yeah.
I noticed your book, you had a lot of, you talk about Alan Turing, you talk about a lot of other things. Are these things that you knew about ahead of time, or is this something you developed as part of your book, as part of the plot?
No, I had, I'd always had kind of a budding interest in the history of computing, especially after I got my master's degree in it back in the mid 80s or late 80s. Yeah, I had heard in one of my discrete math classes, the first time I'd heard of the Turing test was in graduate school. But what I hadn't heard of until just like in the last 10 years was the Lovelace test which is not something you often hear about. In fact, I haven't heard anything about it outside of the intelligent design community. And just for a quick disclosure, the Lovelace test is one at which you task the computer or the AI to come up with something creative that is 100% original on its own, not a synthesis of other artwork or something else that it has access to. And I think that that's really where the nut will be cracked, is when people start actually applying the Lovelace test on these machines that are supposedly candidates for sentient beings, because I think there's a lot that is yet to be understood, or a lot to be acknowledged there, because at the end of the day, these chatbots, these AI entity, or these AI computers are all going to be following instructions that are pre-written for them.
Well,
Jeff,
go ahead, Dr. Jacalyn. I'm sorry.
Sorry, I just was wondering, do you have a copy of your book there that you could read a section for us?
Sure.
And while you're doing that, we have another comment from author Bob May. Talk a little about fear factor in your mystery.
Fear factor. The fear of, there's several fear factors in there. I'm trying to think, what is he specifically can you give me a little more, what specific are you talking about, Bob? Can you give me a target?
More info, Bob.
Yeah.
In the meantime, Jeff will spotlight you so you can go ahead and read.
Okay. Let's see. let me find a passage that's quick and easy. Sorry, okay. This is actually not specific to the AI in the book, but it is tangential to the one of the main characters. And let's see. This actually it portrays an event in the book where there is an eclipse, a total solar eclipse, and the main character, who is actually the narrator of the book, he's experiencing this, and this takes place just a few minutes after the eclipse is finished, and the main character, the narrator, is they're out in a hot cow pasture in middle of Tennessee, and he's trying to take it all in. He's actually had a premonition at this point, and so he's looking around. He's seeing the protagonist in the book, and he looks up and he says, "I couldn't help but juxtapose the sight in front of me with the backdrop of human history. The millennia his forebears took to claw their way up from the primordial muck, of fighting back the elements, disease, themselves, and the frontiers of ignorance and superstition flashed into my mind. It occurred to me that humanity had become, by its own reckoning, the measure of all things. But then I considered further the individual before me, and realized that I had completely misinterpreted what I was seeing. This was not the comportment of a proud conqueror gloating over his technological triumph. He was, instead, the embodiment of humility. The mien of this unpretentious yet precocious whelp, who 3 days ago I considered barely a man, was not one relishing in his pride. Instead, it was taking his species' hard-won hubris, and without him uttering a word, deftly putting it in its rightful place. He stood in quiet captivation, awestruck by the numinous of what he had just seen. His humility made manifest by his deference to what was to him a creative power infinitely beyond his own. The reverence of his silence was deafening." So that's a passage in that plays a kind of a seminal role in the transformation of the narrator of the book. He's a journalist. He's kind of dragged into this murder mystery. He's gone off to across the country to try to solve the murder of the creator of this AI that has become, but for all intents and purposes, a conscious being. And so this occurrence happens to him while he's trying to track down one of the principal people in the plot, and it has a profound effect on him as he's seeing all this, and it plays into a larger spiritual component of the whole plot.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that. We do have a follow-up from author Bob May. When on Run, Paranoia versus Truth.
On Run. Bob is becoming the master of just putting as few words as possible.
Bob's leading us with a few breadcrumbs, but we need more, Bob.
Yeah, I know.
Jeff, do you have, I can easily see a prequel. I can easily see a sequel. Is any of those two options running through your mind?
Yes, they are. I just I'm trying to figure out time to write them. Right now, after I retired, I have a part-time job at my church where I do web design. I print the bulletins. I do a lot of video editing. So I'm 3 days a week. I'm really and I love it. It's much more rewarding than writing software. But yeah, I've got some other ideas that I want to eventually put on paper. I just need to organize them and just take the time and put them down. But yeah, the first thought would be to write a sequel to it, and that would be probably the easiest thing to write. But we'll see.
Oh. Well, the prequel, you have the guy who died there at the beginning that obviously we have no idea about, other than the fact that everybody talks about how good a guy he was. You know, so from a prequel perspective, you know, there's possibility there too, because that company is growing. There's a lot of things that I'm looking at. Yeah, I can easily see a sequel, but I can also see a prequel.
Yeah.
So it's one, if that's the case, then obviously some of the same characters will be the same, or Maybe like one of Dr. Jacalyn's book, one of her children's books, Lady Ella is going to be an astronaut here pretty soon. So you have
Yeah.
the intergalactic world of AI also.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's the possibilities are endless, and so. But I do want to kind of stick with the whole AI genre, and because this seems to be where our cultures is so immersed and just enthralled with, and it's going to be something that we are going to deal with on a daily basis, and there again, it's going to be how we as a culture also um, consider AI. Are we actually going to buy into its omniscience, that kind of attitude, or are we going to take it for what it actually is, just software that someone else has ultimately written? And the real danger with AI for me is not whether or not it becomes a conscious being, because in my opinion, that just you can't do that. You can't write software for something that you cannot define. If you look up the definition of consciousness in any dictionary, it'll be something vaguely circular as like something like self-awareness or the state of being aware. And as a developer, if your manager says, okay, write a subroutine that is conscious, I'm like, well, okay, you're going to have to provide me a non-circular definition of what consciousness is, and then we'll talk. But as far as the danger of AI in the future is how much authority we human beings cede to it. Yeah, the military has these autonomous drones that can go and make strikes on their own. They make their own decisions to go out and know when to fire and when not to fire. That's where the danger lies, because who knows what kind of safety fail-safe is built into these software modules of these drones. So it all depends on how much authority we human beings are willing to give up to the machines.
And we gave up a lot in the HAL 9000, didn't we?
Well, yeah. And we see what happened there.
Go ahead, Dr. Jacalyn.
I was just going to say, I know we don't really have a lot of time for it, but when I think about the Chat GPT, and I thank you so much, Red, for introducing me to it. It's sort of like Christmas came early, and I wish my dad were still alive. He would love it. But it's kind of exciting because you're exactly telling it what to do, and it's refining. And to me, part of what I don't find, and Jeff, you were talking about this, the emotional part. I had that when I wrote my doctorate. I had to do it, my dissertation, I had to write it 118 times. There's so much emotion that goes into that. But with this AI, when I'm asking it to do a project, I don't have any emotion tied to it. So in that way, I feel like I'm able to have more energy and more empowerment to do other things. So I find that the emotional piece, even though I'm running in my masculine energy most of the time, that emotional piece is what prevents me. It's like a distraction from getting to my center of joy on a regular basis, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it can be kind of robbing in that way. Is what
Yes.
you're saying? Yeah.
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 Well, as we're getting to the end of the show, I promised Jeff that he would have time to say, how can people get in touch with you? How do they get their book? What else do you have going on?
You go to my author page. It's called author AUTHOR Jeff Craig. That's JEFFCREGG .square.site, and that's all one word. From there, you can read my bio. You can read a short synopsis that's on the back cover of the book, and where you can get it at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Walmart, and where I am on Parler and on LinkedIn.
And Jeff, we are going to pull up your website because we have it there, and I got so engaged in the conversation. So here is Jeff's website. It's author Jeff Craig, as he mentioned, it's CREGG.square.site. Jeff, where should we go here?
That first little blurb there is my bio, and you scroll down a little further. Those are where my social media contacts are, and my Amazon authors page there. And down at the bottom of the page, that's the synopsis, the 3-paragraph synopsis. And at the bottom of that, further down, it should be where you can go to get. Oh, I'm sorry. There's previous podcasts I've done, and actually I have a little accolade there to Bob May, who he claimed that my book was his book of the year for 2022. So thank you, Bob. Appreciate it.
That's nice.
Yeah.
And here's how you can get your own copy. So everybody who's watching or listening on the live or the replay, please go over here and support Jeff and his work.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All right. Thank you again for being here, Jeff. We hope that you'll come back and join us again, and maybe author Bob May as well. We've got 40 shows a week, so we've got a lot to choose from. Thanks again. Red, over to you. How can people reach out to you and tell us about your latest work?
Okay, the latest thing coming up is in about 10 or 15 minutes on Talking Heads on the USA Global TV and Radio Network. We just finished an 8-part series on cancer, its causes and options. We're now tackling the easy, super easy subject of weight management. How do you lose weight? Why should we even spend 6 weeks on it? Regardless, we're going to delve into why do we gain weight? Why is it so hard to get rid of? And so from the Talking Heads perspective, that's coming up very shortly. The way to reach me, the easiest way is just go to my website, red.olaughlin.com. That's R-E-D, like the color. O'Laughlin spelled O-L-A-U-G-H-L-I-N. So it's Red O'Laughlin, RED-OLAUGHLIN.com. And there you'll find my email address or my phone number. Just give me a call on the phone, regular voicemail. Those are the two best ways to reach me, email and phone. Okay, back to you, Dr. Jacalyn.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Red. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, author Bob May, and anyone and everyone else out there. We will be replaying the show many more times during the next week, and you can always find it over on our YouTube channel, USA Global TV and Radio. Thanks again. Bye, everyone. We're coming right back with Talking Heads.
Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.